Okay, I want to give you a brief tour and an idea of the functions of the FastCat software that we'll be using on the module. When you open up the software, you'll see that it opens up as an Access database, so it's quite straightforward. There's nothing particularly scary in here. When it opens up, you will come to a session management screen like this, and here you can save various sessions so that you can play around with different analyses and so on, and run different calculations of the data, so that you can experiment and try things out without losing all of the work. One point that I should make is that it's a very good idea, rather than working off the software on the university network, is to save it to your own disk, your own laptop, or a flash drive or something like that. Otherwise you're going to have real problems in saving the sessions, and you're going to end up losing work and so on. So as you can see in here, you can identify yourself and your group, give your name, give the session a name, and so on. And these are recorded down here so that you can access them from time to time. So here's one that I did a little while ago, and if we open the session, you can see the features of this phase of the software. Now the point of this is to help you with the calculation of a pay structure within FastCat. And the first thing that we need to do in the pay structure is to decide on the benchmark jobs, the jobs within FastCat that you're going to measure with jobs from the outside world. So if we click on that, you can see that what we get down here are a range of jobs with various bits of information behind the more info. We can decide whether or not to include them in the market survey down here. So there are 27 potential jobs in the information in the database, and I've clicked on 20 of them here. So we're going to include 20 external jobs within our pay survey. Okay, so once we've decided on that, we then have to match those with jobs within FastCat. So we take the information from the last phase, which is about deciding how many job evaluation points, so we can see where these jobs in FastCat relate to each other, which is the biggest and which is the smallest. And at this point we need to start matching the FastCat jobs with jobs in the outside world. So the benchmark job here, Office Support 1, we match with Office Aid and so on, for example, all the way down, so that each one of these jobs from the external survey is matched with a FastCat job, so that we've got 20 jobs here matched with 20 jobs there. The next phase in the survey is to decide which companies we want to include. It's one thing matching one job to another, but we also need to take account of which companies we're comparing to. FastCat has certain characteristics, its level of competitiveness, how successful it's been, its size, its market sector, technologies and so on, which have an impact upon pay, some of the things that we've talked about in the lecture. And so we need to decide which are the most appropriate companies to include in our pay survey. So when we click on this button, we can see that there are 60 companies in the software with pay data behind all of them that we can potentially match to FastCat. Now the issue here for us is which ones of those are going to be appropriate, which kind of comparisons do we want to be able to make. Now there's some brief information here. So for company 1 we can see it's in the software industry. We can see a return on assets. Here it's unknown, but for others we can see different levels of return on assets, a broad measure of competitiveness, of success, and a simple ratio there between base pay and total compensation. If we click on the more info button, we get a bit more. We can see that this is a large company. We can see what its total sales is. We can see again that same data there, and some other ratios, benefits to base, whether there are any stock options, whether there are bonuses, and so on. So we've got quite a lot of information that we can make use of in order to decide whether or not to include a company or not in our comparison. And when we decide to do it, we simply click the box, and if we decide not to, we leave it blank. So once we've decided which companies to include, we also need to decide about updating the survey data. All pay survey data is out of date as soon as the survey is finished. It's all historical to a certain extent. So we need to make some kind of judgment about how much we should update the pay information in there, a kind of percentage increase that we apply to the survey data, in order to take account of the gap in time between when the survey was carried out and when it's going to be implemented. Now, we're assuming, for the purpose of the exercise, that the survey data is 6 months old and that you're planning to implement your new pay structure in FastCat in 6 months' time. So you need to update for a year. Now, thinking about what an appropriate percentage update might look like requires some judgment, some consideration of how things are changing in the labour market, how things are changing in the economy as a whole, and you might want to take some guidance from government statistical websites which can show general movements and trends in pay, which can provide you with an idea of what your update percentage might be. Here I've just put in 4.6%, but that's just an example, and you shouldn't really be guided by that. Once you've updated it, you then need to decide what kind of metric you're going to apply to your approach to the pay survey. Are you going to look at which element of the pay system are you going to look at? Are you going to focus simply on base pay, and are you going to take your mean? Or are you going to look at a particular point in the distribution, 50th centile, 25th centile, 75th? Or are you going to use a weighted mean, which takes account of the size of the companies that are involved in the survey? So if a company has enormous amounts of employees, then they're not treated the same as a relatively small company. There's weight applied to the numbers of employees involved. And we can either look at base pay alone, or total cash, or total compensation. And again, the decisions that you make here depend upon the shape of your own pay structure that you're designing. If your pay structure has large elements of rewards beyond base pay, then it makes very little sense to compare just on base. You need to take account of those other things, otherwise your analysis is going to be skewed. And so on. So make a decision there about what's appropriate for your survey. And also you can play around running different analyses by seeing what happens if you choose different compensation metrics, or you look at different parts of the market, and so on. Once you've done that, you then might want to play around with having a couple of different policy lines. We've mentioned the use of policy lines before. This is about maybe identifying different parts of the workforce who might require to be paid above market, rather than and other parts who might be required to be paid below market. And so you can play around with those policy lines to see what the impact of that might be, so that you can generate policy lines to hang different pay grades on at different points in different relations to the market in the next phase. And this just allows you to play around with that. The next set of decisions to make is about how you are going to structure your pay structure, whether it's going to be a structure based on grades and ranges, quite simple and straightforward, relatively traditional, or whether or not you're going to play around with a broad banded approach with virtual grades or pay zones within that. Both of these work effectively the same way within the software, although the bands and zones is slightly more complex. I'll click on this for an example because you'll be able to see the impact of both within bands and zones. We start off by deciding how many bands we want. So if you were going to do grades, it would simply say grades here, and you choose the number of grades or bands that you want to include. You then need to set the boundaries for your bands or grades in job evaluation points terms. So the lower level here at 100 and the upper level at 350, and you can see that continuing for the subsequent bands. You can also decide which pay policy you want to hang it on, whether you just want to hang it on the market line, pay policy 1 or pay policy 2 that you set. The other issue in the design of bands or grades is the size of the pay range for each one, and he set in the pay range figure as a percentage, so the increase from the minimum to the maximum of the pay range or for the band or grade in percentage terms. And again, that's something that you might want to play around with in a variety of different ways to see how they practically stack up, what the results of those things are, and how that results in a coherent career progression, how different jobs might relate to others within the pay structure, and whether that makes sense in practical, realistic terms. If you're doing a bands approach rather than a grade approach, then you'll also need to think about pay zones. And so for each of the bands, whether it's band 1, band 2 or band 3, or how many you've got, you'll also want to set a number of pay zones, which usually relate to particular groups of staff or job families. And here you need to decide what the minimum and maximum of those particular zones might be, and how many zones you might want to have in each one. And you might want to have different ones. So in band 2 you have 4 zones, whereas in band 1 there were only 3, and in band 3 you've only got 2 zones. Okay, so you can play around with that and make it suit your needs. Once you've done that, you can play around with some reports. The salary data just gives you basic data reports based on the information and the choices that you've made. This one's probably one of the more important reports, the regression analysis, because this provides you with some idea about the quality of the survey that you've carried out, and also the quality of the job valuation process that you carried out in the previous phase. When you're doing a regression analysis, what you're looking at is the kind of consistency between one axis and the other axis. This here is your job evaluation point, so this is your internal consistency, how you've compared one job to another. Up here are the salaries that apply to those jobs which you've matched to in the external environment. So what you're looking for is some consistency between the decisions that you've made over here and the results of the pay survey going up here, so the decisions that you've made here make sense in the outside world. Now, a way of identifying whether that consistency exists or not is to look at your R-squared coefficient. If your R-squared coefficient is 1, then there is a clear match between the internal and the external environment. Getting much below 0.7, and that consistency is quite flawed. And what you're looking at would be massive variations. These little diamonds are the placing of jobs against these different axes, and the smaller the R-squared number would represent wide spacing of these jobs around your regression line. What you're really looking for is a tight clustering of those jobs around the regression line. The R-squared here that we've got is 0.9, which is quite satisfactory. You'd be quite confident that both the pay survey and the job valuation that's been carried out previously are acceptable and something that you can rely on. Okay, so we've got the regression. We've also got the bands and zones graph that you can bring out here, so that when you're playing around with the different arrangements that you've made. This one isn't a particularly good example. You can see the zones are outside of the band boundaries and so on, and this needs some adjustment in order to make this more coherent, to make it fit, to make it work for the purposes that we've got. So it gives you a kind of graphical idea of what's going on in the pay structure based on the decisions that you've made, and whether or not you want to go back and look again and maybe amend things. So that's all that's involved in really the software for phase 2, and hopefully that's helpful in introducing you to that.